All the way from Bokota village in Limpopo, South Africa, we bring you Missionary Minds, where you can learn about family, church history, biblical worldview issues, and of course, missions, all from the mind of a real-world missionary of almost 20 years. And Buddy Paul, many people have grown up with different versions of pastors in their minds. It could be that poor priests they saw in their neighborhood, or it could be the rich televangelist they saw on TV, which gives people very different ideas of standards of living when it comes to ministry. And that's why for our topic today, I want to discuss money issues in ministry. How much is enough? How should we be thinking about this? Over to you, Mfundisi.
First, a story. 2006 was the year a young American man left his home and crossed the Atlantic Ocean to become a missionary among the Tongas in rural Limpopo, South Africa. A couple days after arriving, he bought a single cab 4x4 Nissan hardbody, and a few days after that, he drove into a random Tonga-speaking village, and he started living there. He found the chief and stumbled his way through the language to communicate that he wanted to live in this village. And in the chief's kraal, which is basically an encircling for where the cattle go in African culture, but is also used for the name of a chief's residence. The chief's kraal had a kind of an abandoned building. It's 3 small rooms, corrugated iron for a roof, no window panes and no doors, and no running water, and stolen electricity. And still to this day, that missionary, the largest snake he has ever seen, was renting one of those rooms. He looked into the room, he slithered into the hole in the floor and out the other end, and that missionary said, "This is perfect. This is where I want to live." And that missionary was me, now 18 years ago. And that was kind of my journey of how I began. I lived for 2 years in the chief's kraal, very basic living standards. I had to haul my water each day. I was often sick because of contaminated water. And I so desperately wanted to live exactly like the people. But even then, I didn't totally know what that meant. I think it meant live like the poorest people. I remember so vividly pacing back and forth in front of this kind of shack I was living in and agonizing and wrestling with if I should paint that house, that building, the room that I was staying in. Should I plant some bushes? Like, is this going to separate me? And I think that was really good for me to wrestle with. I was there for 2 years. Now I'm down the road for the last 16 years or so. I live in a different property in the same village. But I really, in those early years, I really wrestled, and I still wrestle with the aspect of ministry and money. How am I going to be perceived? I know this, that I don't want the wealth that I have, and I come from the wealthiest nation in the world. So I know that I've been bequeathed with, I have a stewardship responsibility with the wealth I have. I don't want it to hinder the gospel. I do know that. But underneath that, there are a lot of difficult factors that I've had to work with and work through. And I think anyone who wants to serve the Lord Jesus, eventually these issues of money and ministry are going to come up. Now, interesting point is that I would not say that my ministry was more fruitful or more beneficial for the people when I lived at that standard. I was single, skinny as a rail, just learning the language, early mid-20s. That was like that past life, hauling my water. Now I have vehicles and children and know the language and live in a decent, nice house. And so those are, in a sense, different worlds. But I still want to constantly look at my life and analyze my life and say, on the one side, I have been given much, and I don't want to bury it and just pretend I haven't been given that and say, I'm just going to live as a pauper and not use any of the benefits I've been given. But on the other side, I don't want to flaunt wealth. I don't want wealth to pull away my heart from the gospel. The love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. I want 1 John 2:15 to be stamped on my eyeballs. I don't want to love the world or the things of this world. So that tension is always there. And I started really 18 years ago with that tension. The tension is still there, although as I grow and come to more solid principles, I think the tension is less, but always there. And I think it's important for us to talk about it today.
Thank you, brother. And I can testify that even in my short time here, I've seen both you and your wife consciously thinking about how to be frugal with money, how to be thoughtful about how money is spent, how to think of those around and how they're going to perceive things. But at the same time, like you're saying, you're not throwing away your laptop, you're not throwing away your car and saying, hey, I need to have absolutely nothing as I'm going about ministry. And so what are some helpful principles that people in ministry can use to balance that tension out? What are some principles you've learned? Because standard of living communicates something. And so what are some principles you can help us with today?
Well, I like the fact that you use the word use, because that is what money is for. It's to be a tool. God has given us a tool to use it for his glory. He can easily take it away, and he has been gracious to give it to me. But it is to be used. It is not to be built up and saved to the point of we want to become Silas Marner and become a miser and just see how much gold that we can have. We are to use the gifts that God has given us as stewards for his kingdom. So I do think of the parable of the talents often. One was given one talent. Of course, we know talent there is not talking about an ability. It was, let's just say, 1 bag of silver, or 2 bags of silver, or 5 bags of silver. I constantly remind myself, and I'm constantly telling my children, we are the ones who are given the 5 bags of silver. Our income at the American standard would probably put us around the poverty line, although even though that phrase is ridiculous, but they do have a poverty line of how much a person makes, and underneath that, X number of dollars in the US is considered below the poverty line. In that sense, we are poor by certain standards, but by most standards, we are incredibly wealthy. We're incredibly wealthy, not only money-wise of the nation that we've been born into, but education-wise, and friends, and infrastructure, and all of the institutions that we were a part of. So if someone says arbitrarily, just throw all your money away and don't use it, well, I'd say, what about the education? Like, should I forget all the education that I was given? What about the friends? Because to me, that is something I have to steward as well. So it's not just about money. I have to steward my education. I have to steward the Christian heritage that I've been given. I have to steward the parents I was given. I have to steward all of the homiletics and hermeneutics classes that I was given. Should I throw that away? Should I pretend I never went to seminary and just, like, what level do I put all of those are stewardships. And do I throw that away? And those are very important, real questions. So as we work through principles, I would say that's the first one. To me, money and gifting and heritage and background, this is a stewardship issue. In the end, We want to, whatever we were given, we want to double that. We want to use it to the greatest of our ability, and we want the Lord Jesus Christ to say, well done, good and faithful servant. You didn't bury it in the ground. That's why I came into missions. One of the chief reasons I came into missions since I was 4 years old, I told my mother I want to be a missionary in the woods. And I realized at a very early age, I have been given an incredible amount. Why was I learning hundreds of Bible verses in Awana since I was 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old? Why did I go to a Christian school from kindergarten to grade 12? I don't apologize for that. Now, the world tells me to apologize. The world tells me, check your privilege. And I will not apologize for that, although I realize I didn't deserve any of it. The response to God's blessing is not apology. The response to God's blessing is gratitude and then doubling and stewarding it for God's glory. So if God allowed me to be raised not in Baghdad in 1600, but in the United States in the 20th century, then I have a tremendous responsibility. I want to lift on the end of the log where one person is lifting. We have 9 people on the other end. That's the U.S. I want to be lifting on the other end. I've been given all of this. Now I need to steward it. So if I've been given a great education, I need to be pouring out as much as that education I can to others. If I was given wonderful parents and a Christian heritage, I want to pour out that wonderful Christian heritage to another group of people who haven't been given that. If I was taught musical instruments or how to sing parts, I'm not going to go in another setting and say, well, you don't know how to sing parts or instruments, so I'm just going to bury that and pretend it's not there. I'm not going to boast in myself at all because I deserved none of it. It was all of grace, 100% grace. But it's going to the other side that say, I'm going to pretend it's not there. So I want to steward it. I want to teach the Bible. I want to use the financial. So again, stewardship, I would say, is the biggest principle, and I pass this off to my children. There's no going back. You've already been born into 5 talents, if I can put it. Musical instruments, Christian parents. Even our era is like that. I mean, we live in the 21st century and we're standing on the shoulders of so many people. So even if you, right now, you're listening to this, you have no father at home, you have no job, and you are in poverty, there's a sense in which you've already been given many blessings and many talents because of the era that you live in. I heard an interview one time about a great college football coach. His name was Lou Holtz, and they were asking about his background, and he said, he opened up his statement with this: I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth. Our family had very little money. We were striving just to get food on the table, and he's going on, and everyone's kind of looking at each other, and they say, well, that doesn't make sense. It's like, how can you say you were born with a silver spoon in your mouth? It was a metaphor for I was born rich. And then at the same time saying you were struggling just to get by. And he knew he was saying it provocatively on purpose to make people think. And he said, I said it that way on purpose because I was born in the 20th century, and I was born in America. Automatically, I was born in a sense with a silver spoon in my mouth. And I love that because he didn't see himself as a victim. He could have, oh, I was born in poverty. I was born in the 20th century. Look at all of the enormous gifts I was given. So stewardship, and teach that to your kids. Keep them far away from that devastating victim mindset that is so common, this wokeness of I'm the victim. Pour into your kids, you have been blessed with much. To whom much has been given, much is required. And that is something I try to live out in my own life and pour out into my children's lives. Yes, there are other principles we'll talk about, but that would be the first one. Stewardship. If God has blessed you with much, make sure that you use those to the furthest of your ability, and not for yourself, not to enrich yourself, but for Christ's glory, for the good of the nations, for the gospel's sake, for the church's sake, that others would hear about the gospel of Jesus Christ. So that means, as Piper was so good at saying, he said, if you are given a 20% raise in your business, that doesn't mean that he wants you to move from a Buick to a Cadillac. It might mean he wants you to stay in the Hyundai or whatever it is, but then use that extra for spreading the gospel around the world. That's the idea. So use those gifts that God has given you and steward it to the best of your ability.
That's a helpful start, brother. I think of so many who have the mentality that since I am not equal with someone else, I better bury these talents in the ground until we're at the level where we are equal. And thinking of like someone who's in a choir and they have a great voice, but they want to sing lower at the back of the choir just to make themselves equal with everyone else. That isn't the way to go about actually using one's giftings and one's talents for the glory of God. And here at Missionary Minds, we are a missions and a history-oriented group. And so I want to actually dive a bit into a previous conversation we were having. In the last episode, we were speaking about Anthony Norris Groves and how he came from such a privileged background, and all he had and all he had at his disposal, and yet he chose to go into missions with his wife. And he had certain perspectives around money, certain attitudes that are helpful for all of us to adopt. And so could you speak to us a bit about those?
Yes, he wrote a book called Christian Devotedness. Before I read his biography, I never even heard of it. But the author argues that Christian Devotedness was one of the top, most influential Christian books in the 19th century, which blew me away. It actually has its own Wikipedia page, if that means anything. But it was very influential. You might not even call it a book. You might call it a booklet, or sometimes they'd call it a tract. It was 28 pages, but it was incredibly influential. And it was basically a radical view of stewarding our money, kind of a give it all away type thing. And he practiced what he preached. He had a dental practice. And not only did he leave that dental practice, but he just gave it away. Like, he didn't even take money for it. And then we've talked previous times, his wife, Mary, who is due to inherit $1.5 million in today's money, she left it all. Her father said, if you go to the mission field, you're abandoning all of it. You're not getting any of it. Now, eventually he did give her some, but I don't think she used it. And it was not live in rags and live as an ascetic, but it was the idea of give it all for Christ. And he had a phrase he'd like to say, labor hard, consume little, give much, and all to Christ. And I like that. If you take the best of Groves, his idea was, I don't want to flaunt anything. I want to live simply. I want to give it all for Christ. He was a part of what we could call the three self mentality. When we talk about planting local churches, he would say for a church to be autonomous, for a church to be indigenous, which literally means to be living on its own. It had to have three selves to it. All of these can be shown from Scripture, although that phrase is more of a historical phrase. Self-governing, self-propagating, and self-sustaining. Self-governing would be, we don't want to have hierarchy from outside. Here we are in India, we're planting churches. Why are the bishops from England telling us what to do? We want to have our own elders. Absolutely. That's self-governing. Let's have our own leadership. Okay? Second, self-sustaining. That is, we want to do all the evangelism on our own, all the discipleship on our own. We're not going to rely on our church growing by outside people. But really, the sticking point, the rub, is that third point, and that is self-sustain. Oh, did I say self-governing, self-propagating, and then self-sustaining. Self-sustaining is the money side of it. And that is, we don't want to use any principles, and we don't want to funnel large amounts of money into our ministry so that when we leave, they're not going to know how to sustain on their own. So he was very careful with the principles that he used, not to use outside funds to hinder the local church. He was not a proponent of, he'd said over and over again, of paying the Indian evangelists. Sometimes they would have stipends, etc. But he was a stickler on the self-sustaining principle of teaching the people to give on their own and sustain themselves on their own. And really, that is what will keep the churches from lasting. Many times, mission fields around the world, money is a kind of aircraft carrier. And once you get the big train of foreign money coming over, it's very hard to turn that aircraft carrier around. It's not like a jet ski. Jet ski, it can turn on a dime. But an aircraft carrier, that's going to take a long time to turn around. And in many ways, the gravy train, if we can say, or the money that are coming from overseas, if that were to dry up, you wonder if those ministries would just die. And so he sought to use his money very well. He was generous. He gave it away. He lived simply. He didn't live as an ascetic, but he lived simply. But he was trying to use all of his methods so that it would not hinder the local indigenous church.
Thank you, brother. You spoke of one principle being stewardship. And you've spoken now about a ministry that is self-governing and self-propagating. So another principle that comes to mind would be that self-propagating element where you're trying to give a ministry, give the nationals, help people with something that can be duplicated in ministry, and not having the that freight train of money really hinder that. Could you speak to us a bit about duplicatable methods?
Yes. And even as you brought up some examples, you said, oh, we've done a good job. So many times I think, did we do a good job? Should we have done it a different way? And there are so many ethical dilemmas. So, for example, I don't dress exactly the way I would from the pulpit here as I do in the US. I'm like trying to downplay the way I dress, or even some of the responsibilities, even some of the methods that I use. There is a sense sometimes where we're fighting with one hand tied behind our back, if I can put it that way. But we're the one who tied our hand behind the back. Like, we're not always doing the very best we can because we want them to take it. One kind of metaphor, illustration we like to use is it's like putting a 50 kg bag of cement on your child's shoulder. And if you just drop it on their shoulder and let go, they'll be crushed beneath the weight. But if you hold it entirely, they're not going to do anything. So you place it on their shoulder and you keep both hands there and they walk with it. And as they get stronger, then now you have one hand holding it. And you don't remove it right away because that will crush them. But then eventually you remove that hand as well until they're carrying it. That's the idea. Our basis, a principle is we want them to feel the weight of responsibility. So when it comes to building a building, for example, we did not use foreign funds. Mostly, we use a little bit, but for the most part, we took a year and we built it brick by brick ourselves because we wanted them, to feel the weight of responsibility. Instruments, for a long time, we sang a cappella. And my wife is a beautiful piano player. She is beautiful and she plays beautifully, in case that was not exactly understood, but she is a beautiful player of the piano, and we didn't use it for over a decade. Just recently, in the last couple of years, we started using the piano, but only then we started using the piano because we found a young lady in the church who we had trained and we thought that she could carry it on. So even things like that, we want it to be reproducible. We don't want to use all of these methods, the piano and money and all of these other methods, and then when we leave, and of course that's the goal, right? Like, we're out of here in 2 weeks, right? I can't wait. And you're going to be there and you're going to do a fantastic job in our absence, and Pastor Ntuli and others. Like, this is what it's all about. We are coming for one reason. That is, we want to plant an indigenous church and say, bye-bye, take it on from here and do twice as good as I could have done. So we're out of our church in a couple of weeks and we're going to a different church plant. But we don't want to use all of these methods, and then when we leave, all of a sudden, all those methods go with us, and they can't duplicate those. So I've tried to adapt some of my preaching style. When I don't preach the same way in song as I do in English, and when I watch myself preach, I think it's not pretty, but I have felt as though this is probably the best way that I could communicate and how I know with the Song of People in the way we dress, in our vehicle, even with vehicles. So we do use our vehicle in part. And you tell me if we get it right, Bodhi Carney, because I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. But like in the afternoon, we go to Tiani. And they're not going to be able to go unless you and I drive our vehicles. So we drive our vehicles. So there is a sense in which I'm using our stuff. But on Sunday morning services, generally the people walk. Like we have not made a habit of having a taxi service because when we leave, that taxi service would leave with us. And now I just made it more difficult for my dear Timothy in the faith to pastor the church because I was using all these methods and now he can't duplicate those methods. So it is a balance. And the best way I know how to say it is putting the bag of cement on their shoulder and making them feel the weight. It seems like Paul did that. Like when he went to these places, like he was doing all the preaching, right? And he was taking on the responsibilities, and eventually what did he do? He left it off to the elders. We're trying to follow that.
Just going back to the comment about the vehicle, that to me is answered by the principle about stewardship, because you look at the number of talents you have and you're the missionary, you've received the training, you're here to plant the churches, and we drive 40 minutes to a village, Tiani, and trying to plant a church there. If you say, no, I do not want to at all use any vehicle, I'm just going to take a taxi or I'm going to walk there, it would not be good stewardship to spend 3 hours or
3 days later we get back, right?
Exactly. That's not good stewardship. And the idea being that there's a church here in Bokota where there's reproducibility with the methods of preaching points, someone going out and preaching in public and gathering people into this church. And the vehicle serves to get us to another village where we would plant a church there and people around there gather people into that church. The same way Paul would plant churches in different places and the people in those areas would gather the people from around. And so that's something that's helpful to think of. We could go on for days speaking about 3 days. We could go on for days speaking about this. But as we're about to land the plane, I want to shift gears and switch lanes here.
That was an amazing mixed metaphor just now. I mean, you landed the plane, but then you changed lanes. But I followed you the whole way. So that was and you shifted gears. I don't even know if planes have gears like that. But I followed you the whole way.
Yeah, this is why I wouldn't succeed in aviation. But as we're switching these lanes, we've been speaking about ministry and money in ministry, and we've been speaking more so about the use of money in the ministry that's going on. For a moment, could you speak about the use of money in one's personal life as it pertains to them being in the ministry? So someone could say, naked we came into this world and naked we shall leave. So people in ministry shouldn't seek to really own things like homes or have a savings account or plan for university for their children or those things. And what are some thoughts that could help someone think around, take care of your family as well? You have some ways you're supposed to provide for your family and your children and make sure the admin of life is sorted out. Do you have any thoughts around that?
Yes, stewardship. When I look at Lydia, she was a wealthy seller of purple in Acts 16 when the church of Philippi was planted. I don't get the sense that she sold it all and lived in a cave. I think she used that business savvy that she had, and what did she do? She used it for the local church, right? And people were meeting in her home, and she insisted, like, I want to show hospitality. So that's the one side. Look at Proverbs, where the woman is observing a field, and she buys it, right? And she's clothing her children with scarlet. So that's the one side. That is use the talents and the money and use it to carry out your responsibilities, whether that is being a great church member, providing for your wife. If you don't care for your family, and this is talking physically now, this is talking about monetarily. If you don't provide for your family, you're worse than an infidel. We are to provide for our pastors, and if they do well, then they're worthy of double honor. And in the context of that as well, that's talking about monetary caring for our pastors. Well, ministries don't run on air. It takes money, and it takes real estate, and it takes running your business well, and it takes investments, and it takes buying a house and buying a church property. So that's the one side. Okay, but now swing to the other side, and that is we absolutely must not love money. We cannot love money, and we ought to live as simply as we can. Now, on those two sides, it seems to me that it is obvious that at least the nation that I come from, if they were to be extreme on one side or the other, if they get one side wrong, it would obviously be on the materialism side. Just the overwhelming love, and even from the city that you're from, I would think, Johannesburg, it would just be the overwhelming love of things, of materialism, of making myself as comfortable as possible. I think that we should constantly be leaning into the poorest and most needy areas. And interesting, I said poorest and needy. Oftentimes, the reason that they're so needy is because they are poor. The more a place, if a place does not have tar roads, if it doesn't have English, and if it doesn't have money, as my teammate Seth likes to say, those three, if it doesn't have those three, it's going to attract less missionaries. If it attracts less missionaries and less churches and less pastors, that means it's going to be a more needy place. We ought to be leaning into places like that. So however extreme you are, is it wrong to have a savings account, life insurance, health insurance, a car, businesses, real estate? No, not necessarily. We find examples of that in Scripture. And our ministries need those kinds of funds. I could not be doing this right now. Right now I'm having this podcast. I give easy 60 hours a week totally into ministry. I couldn't do that without some really savvy businessmen who I praise the Lord for, who think, if I could say, and they ought not to feel bad about it, like they think about money 40 hours a week. If they didn't think about money, they wouldn't be good at their job. But in doing that, in being a steward of what God has blessed them to do, I'm able to give all of my time to ministry. I bless God for them. They ought not to feel bad for that. They just have some extra temptations that they have to be careful for, that caring and stewardship over money does not become a kind of obsession with money. It's very easy to get there.
What a treat, Mfundisi. To our audience, if you've enjoyed this podcast, please be sure to rate it and subscribe to keep posted with more upcoming content. Feel free to share this episode with someone who might find it interesting and submit any questions you may want answered in a future podcast. You can email those questions to paulschleierlein@gmail.com. You can also visit betweentwocultures.com for other resources like this. I'm your host, Yamikani Katunga, and until next time, that's it from Missionary Minds.